Now, this week, 5.5 years on from the Grenfell fire, the Housing Secretary, Michael Gove, accepted that government guidance was faulty and ambiguous regarding cladding, and that the government was partly responsible for the Grenfell fire tragedy. Johnny Harvey has more.
Blaming lax regulation for enabling cladding firms to put people in danger to make a profit, the Housing Secretary has now issued developers an ultimatum. Within 6 weeks, they must sign a legally binding contract committing them to fixing unsafe tower blocks or be banned from building new homes, essentially removing them from the British property market. It is expected that the cost to repair fire risk cladding on the homes of an estimated 700,000 people could be around £5 billion, as since the Grenfell disaster in 2017, only 7% of dangerous flats have been fixed. Some in the construction industry argue that the burden should be shared more widely with companies abroad and the manufacturers of cladding products, which have been shown to contribute to fires. Those stuck in flats they cannot sell remain sceptical that this announcement will resolve the issue which has dominated their lives for 5.5 years.
Well, joining us now is Paul Afshar from the pressure group End Our Cladding Scandal. Paul, welcome to you. Thanks very much for being with us. And this is very personal to you, isn't it? Tell us your story.
Thanks for having me on. So 2 years ago, 2 weeks before Christmas, I discovered that my flat was unsellable and had dangerous cladding on it. A couple of months after that, we also discovered that not only did it have timber cladding on the outside, which of course is not safe, it also had a number of other fire safety defects, such as missing cavity wall breaks, so the gaps in between flats that prevent the spread of fire, and flammable insulation, amongst other things as well. To be honest, it's been a real toll on my mental health, sleepless nights, worrying about bills. We have had movement from the government, thankfully, to protect leaseholders, but a lot of things still remain uncertain.
Yes, so give us your reaction to the announcement this week from Michael Gove.
I think it's a huge step in the right direction. We've been saying for a long time that developers cause this problem, they should have to pay for it, not leaseholders. And we've had movements in the past towards that, and now we actually have potential funding on the table. The challenge, unfortunately, for people like me is that I'm in a mid-rised block, so under 18 metres but above 11, so it's dangerous if a fire breaks out. There are 75,000 of these blocks up and down the country across the UK, and so you can do the maths and work out how many people like me there are affected. We are not entitled to the sort of priority government funding which is there to remove dangerous cladding from the highest blocks, and so we have to get recourse from our developers. A lot of developers who build buildings in the UK are not the big ones that have signed up and come forward with the voluntary pledge. They're the medium-sized ones, much like my developer, and they haven't played ball. The announcement by Michael Gove on Monday about the contract is a welcome step. The challenge, again, for people like me is that cladding costs are not the only costs that we're going to have to face. Cladding is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to fire safety. There are many other costs.
So just sum up where that leaves you now.
So effectively, we're still in limbo, unfortunately, because until developers actually come forward with cash, with money to pay for cladding remediation, no work has happened on my block and no work will happen until that happens.
And in the meantime, your flat's unsellable? It's
unsellable, and we're still on the hook for up to £10,000 worth of non-cladding defects.
OK, Theresa, what would you say to Paul?
I agree that the latest announcements are a big step in the right direction. I sincerely hope for the majority of people caught up in this cladding nightmare that, you know, that nightmare is, the end is in sight. But, you know, the questions around non-cladding related fire defects continue to be a problem, and I welcome the determination Michael Gove is showing that to make the developers and building owners pay up. They bear the primary responsibility for this. They must pay up. And Michael is taking really quite revolutionary action, not just, you know, to make sure that you can look beyond the original corporate vehicle that might have built the property in the first place at the people and the corporations and the groups behind, to hold to account the people responsible and make sure they pay.
Meg, big steps from the government this week.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can say that, but there's still a challenge, and I do think it's a welcome step, this. But look, this is the biggest regulatory and safety failure in a generation that led to this. It's now this far on since 2017, and still many blocks haven't got a bit of scaffolding up or any real work done. There's a shortage of people. Government should have been getting people trained to be fire safety surveyors. There's a shortage in the supply chain. But even this bold move by Michael Gove, which I do support, means unfortunately some of those companies could go bust. And already I know some of the developers with blocks in my patch, or the owners of those blocks, are dealing with the challenge of trying to find out who really is responsible, because often they've been sold on. And when James Brokenshire, the late James Brokenshire, was a minister, he took a bold decision to put aside, to instruct government to pay £2 billion, because one of the blocks that he was looking at with the most dangerous cladding had 89 owners, and so he could see the legal challenge. And that's the sort of situation that many of my constituents are in, waiting for those legal challenges to go on. So I think it's a right step by Michael Gove, but I worry that some of those developers may just pull out of the market, even with the threat that they can't develop anymore. And that is, well, we'll wait and see what happens. So it's a good step where it works, but I still think there'll be a lot of people caught.
And of course, this is a situation that previous governments are also responsible for, including Labour, failing to make sure that building regs are up to scratch.
As I said, it's a failure of a generation.
Yes, over 20 years. What more if Labour were to get in, and let's assume that in 2 years' time, when there's another general election, this probably hasn't been resolved. What more do you think should be done right now and, you know, going forward?
Right now, we need to be saying what skills do we need to be trained up in these jobs. If necessary, actually look at the Migration Advisory Committee to get sure people are coming in, so we've got the people on the ground to do the work, and then making sure that this is highly prioritised. But realistically, the legal challenges are one of the biggest delays and problems. The good news is, of course, that now 6 lenders will lend on properties with cladding with certain guarantees, and that is also a breakthrough which gives some comfort to some constituents of mine and some of those caught in the situation.
Paul, last word to you. What would you like to say? What do you want done right now to resolve this for you?
I agree with everything that's been said by both Meg and Theresa. Unfortunately, we're in a limbo situation because no cash is on the table, no buildings are being repaired, no mid-rise buildings, certainly in my case, that's the case. So what I want to see is hard cash on the table and a hard commitment from government that where it can't get the cash, it will actually pay for cladding remediation up front and reclaim it from the dodgy developers who put it up in the first place.
Fair enough. Just in a word?
I think that there's a lot to be said for that, certainly.
Yes.
We must also give leaseholders better redress against building owners and developers.
I would agree.
Thank you. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for coming in and telling us about your situation.